Hey! Be sure to stay until the end of this video to hear a little itty-bitty original story time. Just a little backstory that goes along with this illustration to give you guys more insight into this world. So yeah, stick around. Hello, I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I am painting something for the 24th annual Clip Studio Paint Contest. If you do not know what that is, it is an art contest held by Clip Studio Paint, which is a digital drawing software. It also happens to be the digital drawing software that I use for all of my digital work. They say it's an annual contest, but I'm pretty sure that the last one was just a few months ago. So maybe it's like a bi-annual contest. Maybe that's what they mean. I don't know. Clip Studio, what's up? I've only ever participated one other time in this contest. It was back in 2018. I did make a video for it, but if I remember correctly, I didn't really like the piece I made for it because I waited until like 2 days before the deadline, so I was all rushed, and I don't like rushing my illustrations. But not this time. I was much more on schedule. I have grown, and I sure needed it because I spent a lot of whopping hours on this piece. The theme for the contest this time around is skies, space, and stars, and that was a big reason why I wanted to participate this time, because I just love that theme. Oddly enough, the illustration I did back in 2018, when the theme was Prince and Princess, also ended up coming out pretty sky themed, and I even used a pretty similar color palette. But that's enough reminiscing about the past. The illustration I made this time went through a whole lot of alterations because I did not know what I actually wanted to paint. All I knew was that there was going to be clouds, and that was really as far as my initial inspiration went. And everything else happened as I was painting and through a lot of experimentation. The first thing I did though was I tried to make a few composition thumbnails with different color palettes and different shapes. I also played around with whether or not I wanted this piece to be horizontal or vertical, and eventually I ended up with this thumbnail. It's a shot from high up in the clouds, and there were these like super tall radio towers, and I had it as a vertical piece so that I could really show the tallness of the towers. However, in the end, spoiler, the towers are nowhere to be found. I changed a lot of stuff, but you can still see the similarities of the initial thumbnail and the finished illustration, especially with the cloud placement and the color palette. With this piece, I really wanted to go the extra mile with making it feel polished and detailed because I had never really done that before with an environmental piece. My work is definitely more focused on characters, and so any environments I do paint are usually backgrounds behind or around characters, but never really the focus of the illustration itself. Part of that just comes from me preferring to draw characters most of the time, but also because it has just always been really, really intimidating to do a grand environmental piece. But because of my recent experience with portrait studies, I've kind of trained myself a little bit better on how to break a face down. That sounds a little aggressive. And then build them back up to a polished level. And that process is something that can be applied to anything. And I figured painting a landscape is really no different than painting a portrait in that regard. The initial thumbnail is kind of like the initial sketch for a portrait. It's the skeleton for the piece. The lay-in, or the initial impression of the landscape by using big shapes and simple color values, are like the initial flat colors on a portrait to show the planes. And then comes rendering, which includes edges and blending and building up textures. It's the same process no matter what you're drawing. And just like with my portrait studies where I used references, I also used reference to help with this environment. Of course, there is a difference here though, because in the case of this illustration, the composition was something that I came up with from my head, so I had to like search for photos to help me with specific elements. Whereas when I did the portrait studies, I started with a photo and then tried to copy it. The references definitely helped me a lot though with getting this piece up to that more polished level. You know, you never really know just how many variations of color there is in a cloud until you have a photo of it and you can stare at it for a good long while. And even though I wasn't really able to find any photos of clouds that were the exact shape or color of the clouds I needed in my illustration, it still helped me immensely with giving me an understanding of the way light tends to interact with clouds and how color gradients work with them. And same went for the planet or the ground, if you can call it that. I wanted this piece to peek out of the clouds a little bit and show the world below to help give a reference to the viewer of just how high up in the clouds we are. But I wasn't really sure how that looks. Like, how does the world look from up in the clouds? So I found some pictures that were taken from like satellites and airplanes and used that as reference, and it helped me out a lot. After I was pretty much done with the environment, I went through a lot of ideas on what to paint as the focal point for this illustration. Like I mentioned before, originally there was going to be these big towers, but I ended up just not liking it. It just wasn't working for me. Then I had an idea to draw a dragon flying with someone riding on its back, but something about that just felt unoriginal. I feel like I've seen a lot of art of like dragons flying in the clouds, which is, you know, it's cool, it's awesome, but like, I don't know, just it wasn't connecting, it wasn't getting me excited. So I just started playing with some shapes, and I ended up painting this character standing on the cloud. Just straight up, what are you standing on, dude? Nobody knows, nobody needs to know. And I ended up really liking that idea. I also had painted it in white, which was originally just a way to carve out some shapes, but it ended up looking really cool. So that was when my brain kind of started brewing up a bunch of ideas, like maybe this has some kind of fantasy spirity thing to it. I gave him a little fishing rod because I wanted this figure to have enough defining edges and shapes so that you can tell what it is from far away. It is a really small figure compared to the scale of the whole illustration, so the addition of the straw hat and the fishing rod really help your eyes to lock on to the object and make out what it is at a glance. Also, the sharpness of the figure was very intentional. With all of the clouds and surrounding environment being very round and fluffy, I wanted the figure to be very sharp and angular. This way it contrasts enough to make you pay attention. The importance of shapes in my artwork have definitely been a very recent discovery for me. I'm not really sure why or where it specifically came from. Probably just came naturally from doing studies and then jumping around a lot with my styles from realistic to super cartoony. But I'm really starting to learn that just like how colors are really important in a good composition, shape and flow are super important as well. It's really what makes that initial impact on the viewer. Along with the colors, the shapes and the flow is what decides if a painting is comfortable to look at, uncomfortable to look at, confusing to look at, pleasing to look at. It's the first thing your eyes notice, way before you actually calculate what is happening in the illustration. So I mean, like, there you go, that's a tip. Play with your shapes. Work on leading your viewer's eyes across your painting to tell a story, rather than just focusing on the technicalities and accuracy of each object. Seeing as this white figure had a fishing rod, I needed to have him fishing something, obviously. And since we're way up in the clouds, I figured something to do with souls or spirits, you know, something that would be floating in the air would feel pretty cool and magical, because having him fishing a bunch of birds seemed slightly disturbing. To help with the shapes of the spirits, since there were going to be so many of them, I first used this like weird element brush that's in Clip Studio. It's supposed to look like fire, I guess that's what it's called. But I thought the shape was pretty spirity. It's very wispy, so I just put a bunch of that in. And after I had a bunch of these wispy shapes, I just kind of mooshed each of them around until I felt like they each looked like some kind of unique floating creature. And you'll actually see in the finished piece, some of them look like animals, like rabbits and mice and stuff, which I thought was pretty neat. It did take forever to color in each and every spirit though, because I did want each of them to be unique, but it was worth it. It was worth it. In the end, I am really proud of this piece, and it's actually kind of a turning point for me as an artist, even if it may not necessarily seem like it. I mean, maybe it just looks like a nice painting to you guys, or maybe you hate it, I don't know. But for me, I feel like it's the first illustration I've ever done that feels big. Not in its accomplishment necessarily, but like literally it's big. The scale of it is large. When I look at all of my past artwork, I feel like there has always been a sense of closeness or smallness, which is probably due to the fact that I had always tended to focus mainly on characters and less on environments. But even when I did environmental pieces, I always went for pretty close-up shots of things. Even if they were big things, they somehow still always looked small. And that has always given my artwork a kind of, I mean, I guess to put it positively, it gives it a coziness, and that isn't a bad thing. I like a good cozy painting. But recently, with my practicing and studying of portraits and just, I don't know, just drawing a lot and paying attention to improvement, I feel like my skill level is finally getting to the point where I can begin to attempt illustrations with more scale. You know, pieces where if you were to zoom in to any corner of it, it still looks good. It doesn't look like you zoomed into a painting, and rather it looks like you're taking a closer look into the world. And to achieve that, you have to be able to render things better, get a lot more detailed, and just have a better understanding of everything. Shapes, colors, form, I mean, everything. And even though with this piece, I feel like there's still a certain level of coziness and smallness when you look at it as a whole from far away, I feel like I at least managed to achieve a level of polish where when you zoom into any part of this piece, you could crop it and have it stand on its own. And that ability is something that I'm really, really excited about now. Like, I'm psyched out, honestly, because I have been building worlds ever since I started drawing. I have this one story in particular, this one world that has been with me for so long, and it is so huge and complex, and I'm still building it to this day. And I haven't talked much about it because I'm not really ready to share much of it yet, but it has so much complex scenery that has been so out of my skill level to properly illustrate. And I still feel like a lot of it is, but after completing this piece, I just kind of got hit with this epiphany that like it's possible. With just a little more practice, a little more grit and effort, I really can illustrate these worlds that mean so much to me. It just sort of all of a sudden brought that dream down to earth and made it real and something that I can realistically achieve. Because up until now, for the last 5-6 years, it's been a dream. You know, something that you feel would be just great to achieve. Maybe even something you tell to others, something you say that, hey, I'm gonna make it one day. But somewhere inside you, you don't really believe it because it just seems so unobtainable, so not in your life. And that's how I felt. Like, I would never be able to draw good enough to show these worlds to people in the way that would do it justice. I would never be a good enough writer to present these characters properly. And maybe I'm still on the fence when it comes to the writing part. But I don't know, it's weird and it's crazy and it's really cool to sort of wake up one day and realize that even though you're not there yet, you at least have what it takes to achieve something that you've wanted. That your dreams don't have to be dreams, they can be goals. And that's kind of what happened here today, folks. Are you feeling inspired yet? Sorry, I am a sentimental jamoke, if you didn't know that already. But I don't know, it's a big deal for me, so I wanted to talk about it. Now, as promised, there is a little teeny tiny story thing that goes along with this illustration. It's less of a story and more of a backstory on this world, you know, just kind of an informational thing. And so I will read that to you guys now. Ahem ahem. Gotta get my narration voice on. Every night, spirits are released from the earth to make their way to the stars. However, not all spirits are ready to leave. While it is true that many powerful spirits, stubborn spirits, stay earthbound intentionally, there are also many conflicted spirits who follow the herd despite having unresolved issues. The job of the spirit fisher is to catch any spirits who still carry earthly bonds, such as guilt, hate, and attachment. These spirits simply cannot resist the hook of the spirit fisher. It smells of the earth and all of its sweetest pleasures, something that is easily ignored by enlightened spirits, but irresistible to all who still have not let go of the earth. And though fooling spirits into being pulled and forced back to earth may sound like a punishment, in truth, it is an act of compassion. Spirits who aren't ready to let go of earth will find themselves in eternal unrest and regret if they leave. By pulling them back for a while longer, the fisher gives these spirits a chance to make peace with whatever is keeping them bound. Yeah! Back to normal narration voice. So, no plot or anything, obviously. It's really just, like I said, an informational tidbit. It could be a basis for a story, though. I mean, it's a fun concept. I like it. I could turn it into a story, but will I? That's a very different question. And that pretty much wraps up this video. It was a little long and rambly and disorganized. It had, we had tips and useful information. We had personal growth, sentimentality, story time. I don't know what's going on. But that's just the way it be sometimes on Zaccura's channel. Thank you so much for watching and listening and spending some of your day with me. Also, thank all of you guys so much for 3,000 subscribers. That happened so fast, I can't believe it. I love you guys. Socially distant hugs for everyone. Come on, come here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Also hit that little bell to stay notified on upcoming videos, and before you leave, if you have a moment, be sure to drop your thoughts down in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!